of face part. From the islands to the White House, every headline get dissected right now. No noise, no gimmick talk. Pure facts when Alan start walk. Economics, politics too. Caribbean lens on the global view. Shot a light up non-stop. Viewers calling, comments drop. Everybody got a voice tonight. Reasoning deep till the morning light. We not follow every trend. We are search the truth again. Real analytics, no pretend. Quality times of the standard again. Quality time every Monday night. I'll keep the people minds ignite. Live reaction, facts inside. Rain keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide light. Comment, share, interact live. Everybody on the stream tonight. Them attacking war and trade. All America down so the truth get displayed. Stock market rise and fall. How it really affect the small man now. When the leaders make decisions, Alan, watch close with precision. Deep analysis every week. Giving voices to the ones who see. Audience calling from abroad. Nevis, St. Kitts, London Yard, Florida, Jamaica to everybody locked in for the global view. Reason with the people now. Search for the answers somehow. Every Monday we unite. Knowledge shining through the night. Rain keep the fire blaze. Conversation elevate. Alan lead the dialogue. Breaking down the money. Quality time every Monday night. Alan keep the people minds ignite. Live reactions, facts inside. Rain keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide eye. Comment, share, interact live. Everybody on the stream tonight. Quality time, quality time. Every Monday on the line. Quality time, quality time. Alan bring the facts tonight. Quality time, quality time. Rain keep the future bright. Comment, share, subscribe tonight. Real Entertainment Network worldwide. Quality time. Every Monday night light. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Every Monday on the line. I don't bring the facts tonight. Facts tonight. So the people read between the lines. Run live, run live. Everybody tune in live, tune in live. Global topics, deep analysis. Audience interaction every night. I lump on the live stream shop. Breaking down the news and the world affairs part. From the islands to the White House, every headline get dissected right now. No noise, no gimmick talk. Pure facts when Alan start walk. Economics, politics too. Caribbean lens on the global view. Shot a light up non-stop. Viewers calling, comments drop. Everybody got a voice tonight. Reasoning deep till the morning light. We not follow every trend. We are search the truth again. Real analytics, no pretend. Quality times of the standard again. Quality time every Monday night. I'll keep the people minds ignite. Live reaction, facts inside. Rain keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide light. Comment, share, interact live. Everybody on the stream tonight. Them attacking war and trade. All America down so the truth get displayed. Stock market rise and fall. How it really affect the small man now. When the leaders make decisions, Alan, watch.
Good night, everybody. Good night. 1st of June 2026. Had an alright-ish weekend. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend as well. First thing I want to start off and do is give thanks to the people who have been supporting the show. People who have been interacting, like, share, subscribe. It's a very important thing. As I said, the algorithm help us to push out there, and as we get more exposure, then we could do more things on your behalf. So give thanks to everybody who has been tuning in, as I say, and interacting with the show. Got to get to it tonight because we have well, my partner and a young lady who I respect her as well. They're gonna be releasing some music at 9:15, so you could stay tuned for that. Get a little bit of culture armor vibes. Since there's so much going on and I got a lot to get to tonight, especially, I'm just gonna be brief in my opening statements. Is last week self, I would have tried to sensitize the public and let you know we are going to see an AI election. And you could definitely see from the photos this week, and you could see from the video this week. We saw Mark Brantley flying in the sky fighting Obi, and Janice came in. It's just that was actually, for the most part, some of the nonsense. But there's gonna be more AI. I hesitate because I feel like they're not even using the best of the best yet. As I say, I feel like this is the feeling out process, but we definitely gonna get a pile more, a bunch more of AI videos. And the next thing I wanted to say quickly, this is the 1st of June, as I would have said at the top. I checked yesterday, and up to this time, I still cannot find the NIA budget for 2026. This is a major breach of protocol. This is as bad as anything that the NRP has been accused of. And that's not to defend the NRP, that's just to say we kind of getting the same treatment. Different colors, different personnel, but it's more or less we getting the same treatment from these politicians. There are no countries, no legitimate, respectable countries where you are gonna go this long and not have the budget. I would have gone even further, and I feel like we need to redo our entire accounting standard. Really and truly, we should be in a situation where we getting updates monthly rather than just once a year, and it should be a more up to date circumstance. You got to bear with Ginger. I told y'all last week that she was gonna get puppies, and she did get some puppies on Saturday. Some unfortunate things happened, but she got she puppies and she still got some energy. Anyway, we're gonna start off this week with some tourism. The end of budget tourism. Found this to be an informative video, and I feel like this is something where go. This is gonna appeal to a lot of people. It's not about Spirit Airlines, eh? It's more about what Spirit Airlines represent. But anyway, let's get into the video.
After declaring bankruptcy in 2024 and then again in 2025, 2026 finally finished things off as Spirit Airlines shut down entirely about 3 weeks ago now, following their failure to secure a last...
I uploaded this video late, and so I did not take the time to turn on the volume. Let me see. So we good to go now.
After declaring bankruptcy in 2024 and then again in 2025, 2026 finally finished things off as Spirit Airlines shut down entirely about 3 weeks ago now, following their failure to secure a last-minute government bailout. Now, this particular business closure wasn't exactly shocking to anybody that had actually been following the company, But the end of this otherwise unremarkable low-cost carrier might be both the indication of and the cause of a wider reversal across the entire travel industry. The last 3 decades in particular have been the golden age of budget tourism, with most significant travel-related expenses like airfares and accommodation lagging behind overall inflation to become significantly cheaper in real terms. For a lot of people, this was a very real lifestyle reprieve to offset a lot of other financial challenges. Sure, they may never be able to afford a home and their career may be increasingly precarious compared to their parents. But even a basic income, potentially mixed in with a little bit of new age consumer debt, could let people see the world in a way that was genuinely reserved for the jet set just a generation before. According to the booking company Going, this time last year was the 2nd cheapest month on record for airfares, which they noted in the report was unlikely to change unless there were any major shocks in 2026. So, yeah. Anyway, the reality today.
And we all know, as is still going on in the Straits of Hormuz, that there is a major shock taking place. This video is kind of directed towards the tourism industry, as it is in the name, the decline, basically, of budget tourism. 'Cause as the video started off, say, maybe you couldn't buy a house, or you couldn't buy certain big ticket items, but people had once upon a time feel like, but we could jump on a plane and see something different. And the impact of not being able to do this last year, as they say, 2022 was the cheapest that flights were. No, it was actually last year. And this summer, totally different circumstance.
Is there are several headwinds that are all pushing back against the trend of budget-friendly travel, and increased fuel costs are just one small part of the puzzle. The closure of Spirit may be equally the result of their own poor practices mixed in with unfavorable market conditions. But no matter where the finger is eventually pointed, without their low-cost seats in the market, regular airlines have much less pressure to be competitive on their prices, which is a dynamic playing out in far more places than just this one specific example. Travel-related expenses are up by 20% year over year, and this was already happening before we started making a distraction in Iran.
Drivers nationwide are fretting over increasing gas prices, and now airlines say they are feeling the pinch. Delta CEO said that jet fuel prices have increased dramatically since the war in Iran broke out.
More hotels are charging $1,000 or more a night.
Daniel Jacobs with True Loan Mortgage saying while inflation is on the decline, hotels...
Could you imagine $1,000 a night just to stay? What is happening?
and Airbnb prices are skyrocketing.
The shutdown was abrupt to many passengers, but this was really years in the making. Spirit was in bankruptcy. It had filed for bankruptcy twice within 1 year.
Okay, so travel has been getting more expensive across the board, and the easy explanation is that, well, everything is getting more expensive in 2026. Now, fuel prices are something that is clearly worth addressing, but even before the conflict in Iran, travel-related costs were already increasing, and they were increasing faster than overall inflation after an otherwise long period of pretty consistently getting more affordable. Now, even though it would probably make for a much more compelling video, there is not a single silver bullet that explains why this has been happening. Instead, there are a few headwinds that all need to be considered independently and collectively. And then, of course, they will make a lot more sense when we sprinkle the oil prices back into the equation. Okay, so the first...
So, he been speaking about travel-related costs. So, and everything is about the price of the ticket, you know. So, this is what we're going to get, you know, to understand why there is a possibility that tourism is gonna be down, and this is not bad for every nation, because some islands only really want exclusive luxury guests. But from a numbers standpoint, this certainly has the potential to decrease the overall numbers significantly.
Big factor is that the travel industry has been stratifying itself for a long time now, but the last few years in particular have taken it to such an extreme that it is having a meaningful impact on budget travelers. The most obvious example of this is what happened to airline cabins. The standard for most of the last 30 years has been economy for budget-conscious tourists, business for, well, mostly business people who didn't need to pay out of their own dime and whose companies were happy to pay for them to arrive at a destination more ready to get work done, and ultimately, some airlines that offered first for very wealthy travelers who wanted a luxurious experience above and beyond just the comfort of business. With just a pinch of dynamic pricing and good old hidden fees, this model captured an overwhelming share of the market and aviation spend. Today,
if you are unfamiliar with dynamic pricing is when they change. So you log on now, and the price of the ticket is $100, and then you log back on in an hour, and the price gone up to 200 based on demand. So that's dynamic pricing.
the average international flight has something closer to 6 individual classes you can choose from. Budget airlines, regular economy, premium economy, business class, high-end first class suites like those offered by Singapore or Qatar Airlines, and then increasingly the private jet market sitting on top of all of that through services like NetJets, VistaJet, and Linus's Creative Accounting. In just a perfect encapsulation of this issue, private jet charter companies have been struggling to keep up with demand at the same time as budget airlines are closing down. The same thing is happening across hotels, cruises, restaurants, and basically every travel experience that can be sliced into a class system. Cruise ships are potentially an even more extreme version of this. Cruises were initially pitched as one of the most cost-effective ways to take a vacation because the food and the cabin were all-inclusive, so your total spend was basically locked in from the moment you booked. Today, the fastest-growing segment of the cruise market is ultra-premium yachts, co-branded with high-end hotels like Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, St. Regis, and Amman, with cabins that can run up to $250,000 per week. Investment into this end of the market has been enormous, largely driven by private equity firms who have clocked which way the K-shaped economy has been bending. Now, I think it's probably worth mentioning that this does not mean that they are immune from their own enshittification. Some of the initial reviews of these ultra-high-end cruise ships have been hilariously bad.
Left some toenail on the floor. I definitely did not clip my toenails since I've been in this room, so the only assumption is that's someone else's.
Anyway, all of this by itself shouldn't really be a problem for budget travelers. If the top half of the K wants to spend more on increasingly ridiculous accommodations while most people enjoy budget prices for budget service, well, let them eat moldy cake. If anything, the rise of budget airlines has been one of the great consumer wins of the last 30 years. An aggressive low-cost competition has dragged regular economy prices down with it. The problem is that the low end of this market is now under enormous pressure, and as those budget options dry up, the dynamics of the whole market start to change.
All of them lyrics there essentially is just telling you when there is competition, it's better for you. If there is somebody who is willing to charge a lower price, ultimately that's gonna affect who is charging a higher price. No, the quality has to be some kind of comparable. We ain't gonna just pay a lower price for a dramatically lower quality. But I don't went on Spirit Airline and I got there. And as you say, when they're willing to charge a lower price, then everybody gonna got to come down. So you always want a competition in your market.
The latest example of this is Spirit. With Spirit gone from the market, regular airlines that used to compete with their fares on the same routes suddenly have much less pressure to keep their own prices low. They don't even have to do anything sinister to take advantage of this. They just simply don't have to discount as aggressively as they used to. On the other end, major carriers are also figuring out that they can make a lot more money per square foot of cabin by ripping out rows of economy seats and replacing them with premium economy or business class seats with relative confidence they will be filled consistently. Lufthansa has been openly bragging that premium economy generates around 33% more revenue per square foot than regular economy, and about 6% more than full business class. For a business just trying to maximize revenue, why sell 10 economy seats to budget travelers when you could sell 4 premium economy seats for more money to people whose portfolios have done very well over the last few years? The demand for those premium seats is genuinely there, so they would be kind of dumb not to displace the budget travelers. Oh, and even airlines that do want to add more economy capacity kind of can't right now. The aircraft production pipeline is a complete mess. As of April 2026, Boeing and Airbus are sitting on a combined backlog of more than 12,000 narrow-body planes, with Airbus's backlog alone representing roughly 10 years of production at current delivery rates. Engine supply has become the binding constraint on the entire global narrow-body market, with LEAP engines from CFM International, which power both the A320neo and the 737 MAX, effectively setting the upper limit on how many new planes anyone can put in the air. Which means even if a low-cost carrier wanted to step into Spirit's empty routes tomorrow with brand new fuel-efficient planes, those planes are not available, possibly for years. All of this to say that just as something like Spirit Airlines dragged down costs on the routes they flew from the budget end of the market, the draw of premium seats is pulling prices up as more space gets allocated to higher revenue seats, so when Spirit exited the market, the only remaining forces are all in one direction. Now, to be fair, a lot of former Spirit planes will be de-yellowed and released out there to other airlines. But those are...
So, once again, just to break down that a little bit. When you don't have the competition from somebody who gonna push down the price, and they realize, but you got a lot of money in these new business class tickets. What they're doing is that they're ripping out these seats and putting in more VIP. Everything is VIP. It's all about the money. We see it in the airlines. Sometimes you see it right where you live. You just notice a lot more VIP stuff comes into play.
Unlikely to be focused on the bottom end of the market. With such constrained supply, the existing fleet gets allocated to whichever routes and cabin configurations maximize revenue, and right now, that is just serving the creamiest markets of premium economy and business class. It's not great, but this alone is far from the biggest reason why your next vacation may be in the metaverse. So it's time to learn how money works to find out if the golden age of cheap travel really is over. This video is sponsored by Odoo. Odoo is the all-in-one business management platform.
Really? You got no time for Odoo though? We ain't come here for Odoo. We come here to find out about the traveling.
Okay, the second major factor is what Airbnb has done to the accommodation market when you actually arrive. When Airbnb first showed up about 15 years ago, it was sold as a low-cost, no-frills alternative to a hotel, often with the host actually living in the property alongside the guests. Of course, over time, it too became premium-focused, with most properties being rented out without the host actually cohabitating or really even being present at all. Landlords figured out that displacing their tenants to convert their properties into pseudo-hotels gave them a slightly higher rental yield, and that's all they really needed to know. Now, eventually, cities started cracking down on this as housing in tourist hotspots became catastrophically unaffordable for the people who would actually be supporting the tourists. And as this happened, Airbnb itself started leaning into quality listings, so the cheap end of the platform basically evaporated.
It would be interesting to know how the Airbnb market has affected the market in the islands over the years. That would be an interesting study.
Airbnb's own Q4 2025 results show they removed 550,000 low-quality listings between 2023 and the end of 2025, and that listings flagged as guest favorites now accounted for nearly half of all bookings on the platform. What that means is that the accommodations that survived this cleanup were largely already operating like hotels, while everything else got pressured to either move upscale or go out of business. Now, we covered the Airbnb bust on this channel a couple of years ago, but what we didn't mention was the impact that this platform had on hostels, which used to be the bedrock of really affordable international travel. During the golden years where VC subsidized just about everything, a lot of backpackers opted to split a whole Airbnb between a group of friends over sharing a hostel dorm with strangers. And then COVID pretty much finished off whatever demand was left for this kind of cheap and cheerful shared accommodation. The cumulative result is that the budget end of the global accommodation market has basically been hollowed out. New York is probably the cleanest case study of this. NYC enforced Local Law 18 in 2023 to crack down on short-term rentals, and the results have been kind of remarkable. Airbnb listings citywide dropped from around 38,500 to roughly 5,000, a 92% decline. Outer borough listings, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx dropped from around 17,000 to about 1,400 over the same window. The 12-month average nightly rate for a hotel room in New York City has hit a record $320, with hotel prices in the city up 12.6% over the last 2 years, which is more than triple the national rate of hotel price increases. Now, hopefully it should go without saying that the need for people to be able to afford to live in their own city should outweigh the need for tourists to enjoy a cheap hotel room. But unfortunately, the damage was largely already done, and none of this made New York more livable to live in. What did change was who got to visit the city. The neighborhoods that used to host the cheaper Airbnb capacity, places like Crown Heights, Astoria, and the South Bronx, reportedly saw drops of up to 70% in foot traffic, which has hit the local restaurants and small businesses that depend on tourist spending. So that crackdown effectively just routed budget travelers out of the city entirely, while higher spenders who could afford a Manhattan hotel kept coming. And while New York is the most extreme example, the same logic is playing out at the city level across most of the major tourist destinations in Europe too. Venice now charges day visitors between 5 and 10 euros to enter the city on peak days, with the higher rate kicking in if you book closer to the date. Over 720,000 day visitors paid the fee between April and July 2025 alone. Barcelona has bumped its tourist tax to 4 euros a night, and the total nightly tax on a higher-end hotel can approach 15 euros once city and regional fees stack up. And Amsterdam is capping cruise traffic to 100 ships in 2026, down from 190 before banning them outright by 2035. Now individually, none of these fees are devastating even to the most budget-conscious backpacker, but they do raise the bar in such a way that they can have knock-on impacts across an entire city.
When I listen to all of this criteria, it may be that the Caribbean is gonna be alright, because as much as I see these different places doing things to tax tourists and kind of concern about um over tourism, the more I haven't seen any of this. Well, the only people see is in Jamaica now with the sandals, and that's more to do with the beach. That's not a general thing. So maybe the Caribbean is gonna be a place that people turn to. I don't know.
If you are visiting Venice for the day with a backpack full of borrowed condiments for sustenance, a couple extra euros a day is a consideration. Hypothetically, of course. I've never done this. But anyway, if you are spending 3 nights in the Amman, the fee is a rounding error. This gradually means that fewer budget and more high-end travelers will accumulate in these centers, which means hotels and restaurants will naturally start accommodating to higher-end clientele, which gradually just makes the entire city a more expensive destination. Now to play devil's advocate a bit here.
So what he's saying there is, ultimately, if this does trickle down to the Caribbean, if people are gonna be charging more for like renting their private home, it's gonna mean that locals are not gonna be able to do this. Whether it's renting it in a long term or even just for like a little gig circumstance. So that's something to look out for.
Here, to a lot of city centers that have been somewhat overrun by revenge travelers, this is kind of the point. One wealthy couple who spends 30 grand on a week in the city is providing just as much economic value as 1,000 backpackers spending 30 bucks each, while creating far less disturbance to the locals. Then of course, the third factor is the one that gets most of the headlines, and that is oil. Yeah, okay. This one is fairly obvious, so I will just get to the point. Jet fuel prices have roughly doubled since the start of the war in Iran, with North American jet fuel up around 95% from about $2.50 a gallon to around $4.56. The International Energy Agency has actually called the disruption through the Strait of Hormuz the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. The relevant thing for our purposes is how those costs get distributed. The marginal cost of fuel in a $10,000 business class seat might be an extra $500. Not nothing, but the kind of customer paying 10 grand for a flatbed is not going to notice the difference. A $700 budget airline ticket getting hit with a $100 fuel surcharge is statistically a much bigger deal. And the carriers are pretty open about this. Spirit literally cited jet fuel doubling in 2 months as a major reason why they couldn't make their March restructuring plan work, and they pointed to fuel costs explicitly when they shut down operations earlier this month. So you can see how the oil shock just gets layered on top of the existing premiumization problem. Premium airlines and premium routes can absorb a fuel spike, where thin-margin budget carriers on already cheap routes just can't. The fourth and final headwind doesn't get talked about much in the travel context, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and that is what is happening to the US dollar. For most of the last decade, Americans have been able to lean on a strong dollar to get genuinely cheap overseas vacations. That was especially true in places like Japan, where a weakening yen meant an American on a basic salary could spend a week living large, effectively subsidized by the petrodollar. The problem is that when you flood a destination with relatively wealthy dollar tourists, hotels and airlines slowly adjust their prices upwards to capture all that demand. A Tokyo hotel in 2026 is not the same bargain it was in 2022. And now the dynamic is going the other way. The US dollar index has been trading around 97 to 99 through May 2026, well off its record peaks, and Cambridge Currencies is currently forecasting it to drift down towards 90 to 96 by the back end of the year. The Federal Reserve's own research on exchange rate elasticities of international tourism makes this pretty intuitive. When the dollar weakens, American outbound travel just gets more expensive in real terms, even when the local currency prices on the destination haven't moved at all. And once again, this hits different parts of the market very differently. People earning a salary can simply afford less vacation for the same dollar amount, even if the foreign prices haven't moved. And anyone who needs to top up their trip with a personal loan is doing so at an interest rate pretty much double what they were 4 years ago. People who are already wealthier in asset terms, like stock portfolios and property, have largely had any dollar weakness.
There are ways, and I would imagine the ministers of tourism in the islands are aware of what is going on. Just from the fact of you have people who booking. So even of course there are gonna be certain people who come in later, emergencies, different things. People gonna come in later and book the flight, but you already have an idea based on the bookings now, hotel wise and airport wise, even excursions and all these type of things. You already have an idea. So the weakness of the dollar, all of these different factors make it a very interesting circumstance. And as was said last week was Veterans Day. Last week Monday, sorry, and that is the beginning of summer in the United States. So if there is gonna be heavy travel, as I say, I think this is already known. So if you don't hear certain people saying that this or that hotel is already booked out and is gonna be full, it is not a great sign. And especially you gotta go back to the Straits of Hormuz, especially when you look at the fact that there does not seem to be an easy solution in sight, at least not that I could see.
Offset by their asset gains, and the strong stock market has actually made them more comfortable spending on travel, not less. Now, I just want to quickly mention that a smaller channel by the name of Analyzing Finance with Nick actually made a great video on this dynamic a few weeks ago. He is very straight to the point, but he has done a lot of good deep dives on different topics and is definitely worth checking out. Now, in real terms, travel is still cheaper than it was 20 years ago. And again, just for a bit of perspective, June 2025 was the second cheapest month for airfares on record. But there is no hard and fast rule that says this has to remain true. And for what it's worth, cheap travel was kind of the one consolation prize for a generation that mostly missed out on the other big consumer wins of the last 50 years. They might not have got the same shot at homeownership their parents did. Their careers are more precarious, their student debt is heavier in real terms, and they have lived through 3 major recessions. But the one consolation prize they did get, being able to fly anywhere for cheap, is now potentially also drying up. But from the market's point of view, this is all working exactly as intended. And if you want further proof of that, go and watch this video next to find out how the future became someone else's problem.
I don't understand. I'm not seeing metals. There may be an issue with my Mythos video. I hope it wasn't deleted by accident. It's still in here. Anyway, that being the case, we shall move on to the. We're gonna move on to the. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, we're gonna go move on to the landfill segment. I'm doing this landfill segment because I have seen consistently questions being asked in Nevis about what's going on over at the landfill. Seems to be a persistent issue, and it is definitely something that is gonna have it is of consequence when you think about the fact that the leaders want to grow the population, and the population is in fact growing. When you think about the possibility of destiny, which is another thing that I said would not, I did not see was happening based on the momentum. I backed off, but I mean, it seemed like I'm being proven right. The more and more we move on, just the you just I kind of get a feel for this thing. So I saw that this was not moving in the direction that it needed to head. But the the trash, essentially the landfill, the solid waste management is a major factor. We have had it for a long time, and it is important that we modernize. And modernization does not mean just getting new trucks. It means the whole architecture of how we deal with solid waste needs to be dealt with. So hopefully these two videos are enlightening and can give us some ideas of ways that we could tackle this situation in a more holistic manner.
We live in a world where waste is a part of our daily lives. Every day, we generate waste from our homes, offices, and industries. But have you ever thought about what happens to this waste? Improper disposal of waste leads to environmental pollution and health hazards. Our planet is drowning in waste. Overflowing landfills leak toxins into soil and waterways, while plastic pollution suffocates marine life and disrupts ecosystems. But what if I told you that a simple act like waste segregation could make a world of difference? Waste segregation.
Yeah, by the way, this video, this is not the main video. This is kind of to prime you as we go into some of the things that need to happen. But this is just a simple video talking about how separating our waste could have a big impact on how we operate over at the landfill. One of the things that I would suggest is that rather than raising the price as we did without offering any new service, it may be a situation where we have to distribute new cans, new stuff for waste disposal, a recycling bin, as well as a garbage bin, as well as trucks for other things. Right now, is 4 different trucks. Those come every week. There's a recycling truck. There is the garbage truck. There is yard waste, which is like when you cut down trees and them type of stuff. And then you also have your bulk items, TV, fridge, old mattress type of circumstance. Each one of these is a different category that I'm seeing in Florida. And possibly this type of segregation could be different because if you have yard waste not necessarily got to go in the landfill. You could do different things. But anyway, segregation of trash.
Segregation is the process of separating different types of waste at the source, like paper, plastics, glass, and organic materials. By sorting our waste before disposal, we can unlock a world of benefits for both the environment and our communities. First and foremost, waste segregation reduces the strain on our landfills. By diverting recyclable and organic materials from the waste stream, we can extend the lifespan of our landfills and reduce the need for new ones. But that's not all. Waste
Very, very important point. We reduce what we're putting in the landfill just by segregating it, and we reduce the need for um thinking about getting more different landfills in other areas. So just a simple as segregation could have major long-term benefits.
segregation also makes recycling and composting more efficient. Separating materials at the source ensures that recyclables remain uncontaminated and organic waste can be transformed into nutrient-rich compost. Recyclable waste, such as paper, plastic, and metal, can be reused to create new products and reduces the demand for virgin materials and saves energy and resources. Waste segregation may seem like a small step, but it has a significant impact on the environment. Waste segregation isn't just good for the environment, it's good for our communities too. By promoting responsible waste management practices, we can create cleaner, healthier neighborhoods for ourselves and future generations. But the power of waste segregation lies in our hands. By taking simple steps to sort our waste and recycle responsibly, each of us can play a part in building a more sustainable future. So let's roll up our sleeves and get sorting. Together, we can make a difference, one piece of trash at a time. Help us to educate others by sharing this with your friends, family, and the rest of the world.
Okay, short and sweet. As I said, it's just a little primer to get us in the to get us to understand what is taking place in that regard. Now we're gonna go into more of the main video, which is gonna show us more solutions, different methods for disposing of waste.
On April 22, 2024, a massive fire broke out at the Ghazipur landfill site in Delhi. This was no ordinary fire, but a symptom of a much larger problem. Ghazipur was supposed to have been shut down in 2002. Instead, authorities reported on April 22, 2024, a massive fire broke out at the Ghazipur landfill site in Delhi.
It is important to understand that there, because once again, most of the questions that I've seen asked about the landfill over at Long Point has to do with fires, and the most recent question I saw had to do with just how big it was. It seemed like it's becoming its own mountain at this particular moment in time. So here in Delhi, there was a spontaneous fire broke out at the landfill, and he gonna explain why. And this is not something that would necessarily be unique to Delhi. It could happen anyway, believe it or not.
This was no ordinary fire, but a symptom of a much larger problem. Ghazipur was supposed to have been shut down in 2002. Instead, authorities reportedly kept sending up to 700 truckloads of trash there every day. It has piled up almost as high as the Taj Mahal. When waste decomposes, it releases methane, a highly flammable gas. So not really surprising that the whole thing burst into flames. But methane is also a super potent greenhouse gas that drives global warming. And as our mountains of trash keep growing, more and more of it's seeping out of the countless waste sites around the world. But there are ways to stop this.
So, two things about methane. Very, very dangerous in that it is highly combustible. You try light a cigarette around a methane, you might just light the atmosphere. And it is kind of toxic. It is a greenhouse gas. It is a super greenhouse gas in the amount of damage that it does to the atmosphere. So, management of methane, and you could understand now why some of the fires over at the landfill have persisted for the length of time that they do, because it is once again a highly combustible uh, it is highly combustible.
Food scraps, plastic bottles, pizza boxes. Think about how many things you throw away each day. Depending on how and where you live, this might differ a lot. The average Indian tosses out 500 grams of garbage every day. For the average American, it's 2.2 kilos. By the way, the US is the world champion in waste generation per capita. This pile grows along with cities and the rising standard of living. This was part of the problem in Ghazipur. In 1984, when the landfill first opened, Delhi's population was not even 7 million. Now it is about 34 million. The authorities weren't ready for that. And on the planet right now, we're 8 billion people producing 2.1 billion tons of rubbish every year. According to this UN study, 38% ends up where it shouldn't. Some 2.7 billion people lack access to basic waste management services.
So no collection, no treatment, no disposal.
Aditi Ramola is the technical director at the International Solid Waste Association. She's one of the supervisors of this study.
So for the lack of those options, what do people end up doing? They take their waste, they start to burn or dump it or dig a hole and dump their waste there. And so this is leading to a crisis.
There's no precise number for how many such dump sites there are on the planet, but each one is one too many. And it is important.
It is important to understand that one of the things that we just do to it, we don't burn ours. So we have a trash that is producing a highly combustible substance. We are adding to the problem by just light it off. We burn it off.
To distinguish here between dump sites and landfills.
They are very different things. A dump site is where there is absolutely no environmental control.
When it rains,
now is where we have to look at the modernization of what we have. Because hear what I say? There's a difference between a dump site and a landfill. Two totally different circumstances.
the water filters through the waste and forms leachate, a potentially toxic cocktail of many heavy chemicals and bacteria, among other things, that soak out of the trash.
It's leaking.
This is another potential issue. So you have the methane coming up out of the ground, and you have the leachate because, you know, at some point in time we're going to fall, and you have garbage piling up. It's basically garbage water, and this is seeping down into the soil, seeping down into the water table, maybe even seeping down into the sea, and they call it leachate. Not a wonderful thing.
Into the environment, either through your waterways, your soils, or your air by open burning. And so all of these are emissions that are ending up in the environment that are harming human health. It's harming the environment. When I talk about human health, essentially, if you have contaminated waste, it's going into our food systems.
Under this mountain of trash where there is no oxygen, something else is happening. Bacteria are breaking down organic waste and producing methane, one of the worst greenhouse gases. In the short term, it's over 80 times more potent at heating the planet than carbon dioxide. The waste sector accounts for 3 to 5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Dump sites and landfills are the biggest contributors. And there are the sanitary landfills, which have more environmental controls that try to mitigate all those problems. They started to evolve in the 20th century, especially in the second half, also because the material used in our products have become much more toxic to the natural environment. Currently, the United States has more than 2,600 landfills. That's a lot of trash. Americans have historically relied on landfills for many reasons. Just to name a few, consumption levels are really high, the country has wide open spaces available, and using landfill was quite often seen as the cheapest option in the short term. That is why half of the trash produced by Americans ends up there. So it's no wonder that they host the planet's biggest landfill of its kind, according to the Guinness World Records, the Apex landfill, outside of Las Vegas. It's big enough to accept waste for the next 250 years. Landfill operators use several ways to tackle the problems of dumping trash. To protect the ground from toxic chemicals, they start with a large hole in the ground lined with giant impermeable layers of synthetic material.
I want to know, because this is the beginning of us talking about whether or not we have a modern landfill. If and even if you do this, this last 30 years, did ours begin with this lining? Because this is a relatively new phenomenon. So if our landfill began back in the 60s, 70s, I'm not certain that we have this lining underneath. And this is why the leachate becomes a problem, because the lining is supposed to prevent the leachate from going further down into the soil and doing damage in that way.
Kinda like a huge empty swimming pool with a big plastic sheet in it. At the bottom there's a drainage system to remove the leachate that's generated. Sensors can also be placed at the bottom layer to detect any possible leaks. After the leachate is treated, it is turned into reusable water. Nowadays, an engineered landfill can also capture most of the methane emitted by making a kind of trash lasagna that stops most of it from going to the atmosphere. As the garbage is dumped, heavy tractors compact it and then cover it with an impermeable layer. Dump, compact, cover, repeat, over and over again. Then a kind of system of pumps sucks out most of the gases generated, including the methane. At this point, there are two options. The methane captured can be burned through a process called flaring that turns it from a super harmful greenhouse gas into a regular harmful one, CO2. But this is a huge waste. Here comes the second option. Methane can generate heat, electricity, or renewable natural gas in power vehicles, for example. Many US landfills use these technologies, and we even hear in the media that altogether they produce enough equivalent energy to power 1 million homes. This technique promises to reduce methane emissions by 60 to 90%. So, problem solved? Not quite. Using special
So, one option we have is to siphon off this methane and do what they call waste to energy. So you burn the methane, you turn it into natural gases, and in that way you could power homes. I think they say you could power vehicles, but there is some versatility. So in this example, you're looking at trash not just as trash, but trash now is a resource. And I actually saw that there's a country who is running out of trash. And so that they buying trash to burn now for this particular purpose.
infrared cameras on planes and satellites, researchers have detected substantial leaks. Current measuring methods, which usually rely on ground observations, couldn't detect them. The researchers found that US landfills emit 1.4 times more methane than officially reported. But it's not all bad news. This data can help landfill managers to detect leaks and reduce emissions straight away. However, not all solutions in this field need to be so high-tech. The IPCC's recommendation to reduce methane emissions from landfill is much simpler and more straightforward. Reduce the amount of organic waste in them, because the methane emissions from landfills are produced when organic matter decomposes underneath a pile of garbage without oxygen.
This is wonderful, and this comes back to the need to separate. In all reality, and I never used to do this, at least when I was in the islands, but this is something that should never be done. Organic matter is not supposed to be disposed of in the same way as you dispose of garbage. You could compost, you could do many other different things, and this is contributing a lot to the methane. And this is a low cost solution. Does not require bringing in any fancy equipment or anything like that. This is just a matter of education and then separation, and then that will lead to noticeable reductions in the amount of methane that is being produced.
We had taught our younger generation that waste is not waste, it is a resource. Probably this situation would not have arisen.
This is Sharad Kale, a scientist who specializes in waste management in India.
Being a warm environment, our environment is very good for degradation of the material. So if you do it in a scientific way, in a structured manner, I think we can actually stop the methane emission lead.
In countries like India, where around 50% of the garbage is wet waste, avoiding it in landfills can be really effective, and some places are being quite successful in implementing this policy. Take Mysuru, for example. With a population of more than 1 million, it produces between 400 and 500 tons of waste daily. The authorities designed a decentralized system in which trash gets collected, segregated, and composted inside their neighborhoods. Here it is important to remember that composting is
any politician who was to implement this type of system, I'm gonna champion you. At least for this, absolutely. So here you have a situation where the organic matter is not even leaving your community. They have found ways to collect it, compose it inside the community for the benefit. And there's wonderful things you could do after you have composted this organic material.
An aerobic process with oxygen, where microorganisms break down organic matter. It can release small amounts of methane if it's not properly done, if there isn't enough aeration. That is why quite often you see people turning the compost regularly. In Mysuru, about 50% of all waste is composted. For that, the collector goes from door to door. If residents don't properly separate their trash, they'll be fined. Officials say only 5% of the trash goes to landfill. Their goal is zero waste.
Zero waste management is like no waste should go to the plant or a landfill to the incineration plant. So we are completely managing the waste which are receiving from different wards of Mysuru City Corporation.
The compost produced is sold to local farmers in the horticulture department. When you look around India, this may feel like a drop in the ocean, but it is a great example that shows it can be done. Composting also sorts out another huge problem. Almost 1/3 of the country's farmland suffers from soil degradation, partly due to the heavy use of chemical fertilizers. Now, organic compost is being used on farms to restore the land.
So, in circumstances where the land is losing value, because as you plant, the plant is gonna soak up the nutrients in there. One way to replenish it is, rather than wasting this organic material in the landfill, there could be some composting and there could be a real boost to agriculture. I think this would, for example, be highly beneficial to an area like the Indian Castle, Orchard. I possibly a pilot program in the Gingerland area to see how that goes. I feel like that would be wonderful. But it's just my 2 cents as what this would
This is a great example of climbing up the ladder of the waste hierarchy. At the very bottom of it, it's the worst possible way to get rid of trash: open burning or dumping.
So this is the hierarchy. And you can see that when you burning are just doing dumping, which is what happens in the islands generally. This is the worst way you could dispose of solid waste.
That is where the wet waste we just saw would probably end up. Then comes disposal without energy recovery, like kinds of landfilling or incineration. Next is waste to energy, which is an umbrella term for a few different methods, like the US landfills we saw generate electricity out of methane. Here comes recycling. This is where the composting examples are. Even better is to reuse.
big of a scan, we have been embarking on the recycling journey of late. And the reusing one is one where, I mean, it's simple. You get a bottle and you know, throw 'em away. You use them again, you clean them up. The more you could do that, you are being beneficial to the society by doing that simple thing.
Use things, often referred to as upcycling. And at the top of it is prevention and reduction. That part depends a lot on waste producers, so companies as well as individual consumers. Going up in the pyramid is not always easy. Closing dump sites and making landfill better is a challenge and can be a long process, but it can be done. Like in Rio de Janeiro, it once hosted Latin America's biggest dump site, Jardim Gramacho, which received over 80 million tons of garbage in 30 years. The surrounding mangrove forest was devastated by its leachate.
Então, a partir de 1997, foi feita uma barreira que coleta esse chorume. O chorume é tratado e só depois é lançado na Baía de Guanabara.
So this is back to the plastic that would be underneath of the landfill, and you're also going to build some kind of pipes to siphon off the leachate, and as the gentleman suggests, you could treat it, and you could even put it back into the swamps. For those who don't know, you got a thing in Nevis where we don't got bags. What the English would say is bogs, BOGS. Well, BOGGS. We don't say bags like BAGS. In general, this leachate could be used to revitalize those areas, as he's gonna describe was done in Brazil.
Mario Moscatelli is the biologist responsible for this restoration project.
Então, nesses 30 e poucos anos de trabalhos quase que contínuos, nós recuperamos a maior área de manguezal da Baía de Guanabara, que são 130 hectares de mangue.
The mangrove forest captures a huge amount of CO2. This kind of vegetation can absorb up to 4 times more carbon than other forests. And now, Rio's waste goes to a modern landfill outside of the city. The site captures most of its methane emissions. According to the operator, it generates enough energy to power a city of 90,000 residents. It is a modern engineered landfill, which costed around $90 million. But that doesn't mean that the problem is solved. In nearby Gramacho, there are still illegal dump sites. And even in the restoration project itself, there were problems with leaking leachate in 2014, which now seems to have been sorted. This approach isn't cheap and it's not perfect, but it does have a lot of potential. Look at this graphic. It shows regions that still have a huge number of open dump sites. In this...
You can see we make the list, eh? We in the far right, Central America and the Caribbean, we got a bunch of open dump sites. Definitely the one over a Long Point is an open dump site. So there needs to be something done in order to arrest the situation where it is right now.
Some experts suggest that moving from dump sites to landfills would already be a step forward. On the top of that, separating at least the organic trash before sending it to the landfill, like in Mysuru, is something we can do on a global level. Of course, reducing waste is the top priority that can also be reached worldwide and is placed at the top of the pyramid. But let's face it, right now we're producing more and more trash worldwide. The power of smart waste management is that it can reduce costs in the long run. The higher up in the waste pyramid you go, the more money you can make from the trash, such as by making energy or reselling trash as compost. And the more waste you collect in a controlled way, the less harm it does to the environment, and the less money is needed to clean up this mess. What about you? Do you have any problems with dump sites or landfills nearby where you live? Any cool solutions around? Let us know in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe.
One other thing that I will mention, in Singapore, they're very heavy on the waste to energy aspect. And so they said essentially it reduces the waste by like 16 was it 6? No, 14 times. So if you send 14 tons of waste, they're going to reduce it down to 1 ton of ash. And they're experimenting with being able to mix this ash in with, like, when they're doing roads, different types of construction. It is not feasible for smaller islands like ours, and so that is why I did not include it. However, if one of the larger islands was to pursue it, then maybe there would be a situation where there would be one of those who is importing trash. We reach now to what I feel like is the most exciting part of this evening. I wanna talk about some corruption in politics, and I'm not gonna single out any particular politician or circumstance, but this is more, as I said, this is kind of to educate you so that you could understand what is political corruption, you could understand how it affects you, and you could start to understand ways in which we could kind of fight back. Because you're not just a passenger. Hold the wheel and spin the wheel and all. La big mash up. But it's not a situation where you're helpless in the vehicle and you can't do nothing about it. So the first video gonna be short and sweet. This is a primer, just like what we just done do, and it gonna be a video speaking about how corruption affects you as an individual.
What is corruption? To us, it's simple. Corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. Whether it's paying a bribe to access public services like healthcare and education, bribe to access public services. What is corruption?
Yeah, sorry. I had to go back to make sure that you hear what the definition is. Yeah, start now. Short and sweet.
To us, it's simple. Corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain.
To even break down that a little further, if you have a public position, and it could be private too, but if no, I'm gonna say public. If can't really in politics. If you have a public position and you use your position for your private enrichment, say for example, somebody ain't deserve their license, but you are the man who in charge, and you give them anyway. Gotta give you a little money. Gotta give you some access to something. That is corruption. So once you benefit privately from the public trust that has been given to you, corruption.
Whether it's paying a bribe to access public services like healthcare and education, or whether it's money laundering schemes involving billions in dirty money. What's important is how corruption affects you, and the cost of corruption can be enormous. Corruption can cost you your livelihood, your rights, your health, your freedom, and sometimes even your life. It erodes democratic freedoms, rule of law, and trust in government. Corruption also reduces your chances for a healthy environment and sustainable future. When money meant to tackle the climate crisis is stolen, that's your future being taken from you. When money meant to improve your local schools, hospitals, and roads is snatched away, opportunities for a better life are lost with it. When money meant to improve your government and the rule of law is stolen, so too is your chance for a more just and secure future. Every year we lose billions to corruption, billions that were supposed to improve all of our lives, our opportunities, and our communities. At times, the scale of the problem can seem overwhelming, but corruption is not inevitable. Together, we have the power to stop corruption. Join us.
Okay. No, we've been going to the UK recently, and we're gonna get some help from the premier's university, Oxford. So we're gonna hear somebody who is at Oxford describe in a little bit more depth. We're still in the priming stage about different aspects of corruption, and he gonna speak specifically to corruption in UK politics because it's tricks in the trade. People just learn and watch from what other people do, and us having inherited the Westminster system, it is only right, in my estimation, to look at how their corruption operates, because it's not that different than what occurs in the Caribbean on a daily basis.
Hi, I'm Tom Crook. I'm a lecturer in modern British history at Oxford Brookes University, and I'm here to talk about the corruption of British politics. One of the charges made against the political classes in Britain today is that they are corrupt, that government ministers and MPs regularly abuse their public office in order to advance either their own personal interests or the interests of their friends and family and their political allies and party donors.
So we understand that we got a little bit more information. It's not just you personally have to benefit. If, for example, your brother benefit, if, for example, your lover benefit, some kind of other family, it could even be a friend who benefits. These are things where there may be some corruption. But I'm going to let the professor speak.
Is there any truth in this charge? I think there is. We need to be careful about how we use the term corruption. For one thing, I don't think we can, as yet at least, point to what we might call systemic corruption. A corruption so endemic that it implicates the majority of our ministers and MPs. We have, it should be said, seen this in the past, in the 18th and early 19th centuries.
I would also say I do not see systemic corruption in St. Kitts and Nevis, not as yet. I know people have used the phrase this without any discrimination. They just say everything corrupt. But I don't think that's accurate. And as he says, systemic corruption is more when you go say the majority of politicians are like people in power. When you see the majority of them corrupt, then you have systemic corruption. If you got one or two bad apple, I'm not saying there's no corruption, but it's not systemic.
Public office was dominated by the aristocracy when there was no distinct civil service as such, and when the tiny minority who possessed the vote were often bribed and intimidated at the polls. We need, in other words, to keep things in perspective. Corruption is a problem in British politics today, but it's not as pervasive as it has been in the past. Secondly, we also need to be clear about what today's corruption consists of and ultimately what's at stake. Now, one way to think about corruption is as a particular piece of wrongdoing, an act of bribery, for instance, or an act of fraud. Let me be clear, this kind of corruption has taken place in British politics in recent decades. In the 1970s, it was discovered that a leading government minister and 2 MPs had received bribes as part of a network of contacts put together by the businessman John Paulson. In the 1990s, it was found that a small number of MPs had accepted, or were prepared to accept, cash payments in order to ask questions in Parliament. In 2011, 6 MPs were jailed for defrauding the House of Commons expenses system. However, this isn't the key problem today. The biggest problem today, as it has been since the early 20th century, concerns conflicts of interest.
Wow. Sensational. So understand, there are different aspects of corruption. Bribery, we understand that. Somebody pay you to something. You take a bribe. Fraud, You understand them thing the two? Conflict of interest is a more subtle aspect of corruption. If if I mean, let me stop, gotcha. Professor, you tell us about the conflict of interest.
These are best thought of as situations rather than discrete acts, as relationships and connections which might lead to the judgment of a public office holder being impaired,
So, as he said, these are not acts. When you think of a conflict of interest is not an activity. No, there's some activity that goes on around it. You don't fool yourself. But when we're talking about conflict of interest, we're looking at a relationship. And we're looking at how that particular relationship might affect individual in power's judgment. So, say for example, my wife is she's into health. If there is a contract that would benefit her, and you better believe if it benefits her, it benefits me. And the contract is coming from it doesn't even have to be her company. It just has to be a situation where she is gonna be benefiting, and therefore I am gonna be benefiting. That relationship and the fact that I might vote to approve the deal because of that relationship and because I can win on the game too. Conflict of interest arises in these particular circumstances.
he or she thinks first and foremost not of the public interest, but of their own interests, or those of their friends, allies and donors. In other words, relationships and connections which might lead to their judgment being corrupted. Now, conflicts of interest are difficult to avoid in politics. Ministers and MPs require allies. They have friends and family. Parties require donors. Governments are lobbied by firms seeking contracts and changes to the law. I might go on. What's more, it's difficult to prove that someone's judgment has in fact been impaired. We can't, after all, tell what's going on inside someone's head. But this is precisely why there exist detailed regulations and codes of conduct expressly designed to help ministers and MPs avoid both actual and apparent conflicts of interest. And
when you hear ministers talking about integrity in public life, it is important to know if there are any rules about the disclosure of existing conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest. The only way to ensure that the public is first and foremost is if these conflicts are disclosed as soon as possible, and certainly if they are discovered, that they are not dismissed. And it is not said that, oh, well, everything is a conflict of interest. Nope, 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 unacceptable. So the way to curb or fight back against possible conflicts of interest is to have legislation dictating that you have to disclose. And I would go further: in certain circumstances, you could decide, I'm going to recuse myself from this decision so that it cannot be said that the conflict was active, at least not for me. Let other people make the call.
the general rule is that if they can't avoid these conflicts, then they must declare and register them. So what's the problem of corruption today? The problem today is that ministers, and to a lesser extent MPs, have developed an entirely cavalier attitude towards conflicts of interest, as if they didn't exist, as if the rules and regulations don't apply to them. It's not a new problem, but it's one which has got much worse in the past decade. Let me give you some examples from Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister. The award of a peerage to a former Conservative Party treasurer and party donor, Peter Cruddas, despite being advised not to do so by the House of Lords Appointments Commission. Or again, the reliance on party allies to fund the refurbishment of the Downing Street flat, as well as 2 foreign holidays. These examples attach specifically to Johnson, but others extend much beyond him. The award of PPE contracts worth hundreds of millions of pounds during the COVID crisis to firms whose owners had connections to the Conservative Party.
See that again? If there are firms, institutions, businesses that have direct or indirect connections to the party or to individuals, you could clearly see how this is a conflict of interest. Destiny, it might be your destiny. Them type of settings.
The undeclared lobbying of senior ministers by the former Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron on behalf of a company, Greensill, in which he had a significant financial interest of his own. Many more examples might be provided, but together they amount to an unprecedented disregard for basic rules designed to safeguard probity in public office and uphold public trust. The phrase often used to describe this is cronyism, but it's also a form of corruption. How can we explain this? Simple moral failings on the part of individuals are a crucial part of the explanation, but so too are more structural developments that have taken place since the Thatcher administrations of the 1980s. The centralisation of power in Number 10, the growing influence of special advisors, consultants and professional lobbyists in West.
Particularly special advisors who have been rejected by the public. It may be that we need to really look at this. It cannot be that your reward for being unsuccessful at the polls is to be made a special advisor. It definitely falls into the realms of corruption, and we see it all the time. Something got to be done to slow this down. There has to be some way to make more of these appointments merit-based and not simply you appointing your associates.
Westminster and Whitehall, the now entrenched use of private profit-making companies to deliver public services, the revolving door between ministerial office and positions in the private sector. None of these developments have necessarily caused the kind of corruption we see today, but they have made the moral failings of individuals both more likely and more consequential. Finally, we might ask, what difference would a new government make? One would hope that rules would be tightened and that they would be followed more diligently. But until some of the factors I mentioned a moment ago are properly confronted and addressed, we can, I fear, expect to see more of the same. And the charge of corruption will continue to haunt British politics.
Okay. I'm moving fast. As I say, we'll be out there at 9 o'clock. Music is at 9:15. So we're going to the main event. This is Jimmy the Giant. And I can't believe I wanted to do something on corruption, and he put this out the very week I wanted to do something on corruption. So, thank you to Jimmy. Wonderful guy. And we're going to get into
this video is brought to you by economies. It's 1939, right? The Great Depression's just happened, and a geezer by the name of Edwin H. Sutherland gets up and delivers a speech called The White Collar Criminal. As he gets up, he explains that the entire academic study of criminology was fundamentally wrong. And it's because when they studied crime, they naturally went to prisons and studied prisoners. But the problem with that is that prisoners are just the criminals who society chooses to punish. And who does society punish? Poor people. So your boy Edwin was asking a very controversial question. What if rich people also commit crimes? So as you can imagine, for Edwin, right, when he comes to write this into a book in 1949, he's expecting the entire world to go, great point, Eddie. But instead, his publishers force him to remove the names of individuals and corporations, fearing the potential legal backlash from these very, very powerful criminals. And it's in many ways that story really is the foundation of how we have arrived into this particular moment in history we are in right now.
In just a few hours, President Trump will head to an exclusive MAGA Inc. dinner party at the Trump National Golf Club in Virginia. Other media outlets have reported that the dinner costs $1.5 million per person and will also feature venture capitalist David Sachs. Let's begin. We know Trump has his own crypto meme coin. So what is a meme coin? How is it different from Bitcoin?
And it really makes you wonder why. Why is no one talking about this as the epidemic that it clearly is? Considering the massive scale of damage that white-collar crime has, both economically and socially, is often far bigger than that of street criminals. But yet, time and time again, we see these criminals go unpunished. But there is a very specific reason for this. In order for us to try and make any sense of this insane era we're currently living in, we first need to understand how this behavior became slowly normalized to begin with. This is how we built the golden age of corruption.
How lavish a lifestyle would you lead if you were the richest man on earth? In this world-exclusive edition of Lifestyles, we'll explore the fabulous private domains of Adnan Khashoggi, whose globe-trotting existence is so unbelievably lush, it has inspired blockbuster movies and novels which only pale in comparison to the true story you will see in the next 60 minutes.
Okay, so now we're going to plop ourselves all the way in 1982. This year is important because this is the year that the first ever Forbes 400 is published. This is a list of like the wealthiest money men on earth, right? These are rich bros. And if we flick through this issue, we'll find one very important fella by the name of Donald Trump. Here he is, him and his dad, Fred Trump, celebrating their net worth of $200 million. And you have to understand this period, right? The 80s is a weird time of massive cultural change. And what they're trying to do, the media, the establishment, is change society's perspective of rich people.
Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old. You're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active and be interested in what I do. And that's all there is to life as far as I'm concerned. I really am not looking to make tremendous amounts of money. I'm looking to enjoy my life. And if that happens to go with it, that's fabulous.
Okay, so in the past and kind of forever, rich people were largely seen with suspicion. Probably if you're that wealthy on the way up, you definitely broke a few eggs. Like, you're probably not a nice guy. And that was like society's understanding of these people. So things like the Forbes 400, they were there to basically say, no, bros. These business boys, they're actually super nice and totally chill, cool guys. Look at them, man. Look how cool their hair is. Huh? Look at the car. Look at this phone that I have. Wow. Look at the women. Women around and fake boobs. Obviously, guys, you can trust them. Like, don't worry about it. Before we go any further with this video, I've been using today's sponsor, Economies, for a while now. And I was pretty surprised to find...
Yeah, you know me like Jimmy, but we ain't come for Economies. We here for the yachts. Anyway,
celebrities through newspaper articles, TV shows, photo shoots, showing off their lavish lifestyles and, you know, celebrating how hard they work to get it. And the reason they need to do this is because the 80s and 90s comes off the back of a wave of deregulation of the finance sector. In America, you have May Day in 1975, and in the UK, we have the Big Bang in 1986. Waves of deregulation come in. It means that banks can now do riskier, stupider, and eventually illegal things that would collapse the economy a couple of times. And while some of this deregulation led to, you know, certain people making lots of money, it also created a ton of massive scandals. You get Ivan Boesky, you get Michael Milken, the Guinness Four. They do insider trading and various schemes. And, you know, they all go through like a major public scandal, newspapers, everyone's like, don't do that, stop it.
A former Purdue sales rep claims the drug maker downplayed the dangers of opioids even after pleading guilty to a felony charge of misbranding. But 24 states and more than 400 cities and counties are suing Purdue and its competitors, accusing them of fueling an opioid drug crisis that's killed more than 200,000 people.
Do you believe that any of Purdue's conduct has led to an increase in people being addicted in the Commonwealth of Kentucky?
No.
In society's eyes, these people, these criminals, don't really look.
This man just deadpan. Do you believe It affected any. Nah. Affect the share price.
How we imagine criminals to look. I mean, like, look at the guy. Look how respectable they look. Look, suits. And so the media does this weird thing, and you can see this. There's studies being done on this, where they start to adopt a very specific type of language when they talk about them. They get described as like rogue traders, market mavericks, corporate raiders, deal makers, the junk bond king.
Kweku Adeboli entered court this morning a free man. Tonight, he leaves as the biggest rogue trader in British banking history.
They were always described as being like clever, ambitious, ruthless, maybe even a little bit brilliant. They were never, ever described as being pathetic, undesirable, or degenerate. Like when young Ads goes to jail for selling drugs, you don't tend to scroll through the article and see a whole section admiring their ability to negotiate down a kilo of cocaine due to their expert handling of knives. For the white-collar criminals, their stories are individualized. The story is about the man, his suits, his mansion, his ego, his parties, and then the dramatic downfall. This is markedly different to how street criminals are often represented in the media. If, you know, a roadman goes to jail.
And this is also, you see this weird Banky picture in the newspaper, Banky ban all over social media. And the driver pull a gun ban another police. You can't see a picture of the driver, just transfer the driver. Or how is this equitable? And not ain't white collar crime, same way still. But I'm just showing that there is a kind of inequity there.
The focus of the story is about where he's from, his skin color. You know, maybe it's even about the music that they listen to, the fashion, the influences.
It's not just a police problem. This is now a community problem. And some of the things driving it, I believe, are social media and rap or drill music.
The rogue trader is never explained in this way. They don't talk about, you know, how they emerged as a result of deregulated markets, a broader cultural obsession with wealth, structural incentives to rapidly grow businesses and deceive investors. For the white-collar criminal, the system is innocent. The man becomes the story. Where maybe they get punished, maybe 10 months in jail, a fine. They are ultimately described as just a bad apple. However, this is the point, right? The way that we see these types of criminals, the way we lessen their crimes, we don't feel the same level of disgust, condemnation towards them. It means that we avoid seeing the broader damage that their crimes can commit on society. Like, for instance, in the UK, it's estimated that theft costs us about 4 billion a year, but financial fraud costs us 219 billion a year, which is more than the entire NHS budget. Globally, it is estimated that financial fraud costs 5.5 trillion a year. So what we're seeing with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and these kinds of people, we'll get more into specifics in a moment, you have to understand that it is because of what happened in 2008, right? Where these white-collar criminals got carried away and managed to collapse the entire global economy. That caused a deep rupture in trust in society towards the systems that we depend on. Because there was undeniable direct damage from the actions of those bankers and the many people around them that protected them and enabled them, that it couldn't just be sold off as like the story of the one bad apple. It is estimated that an additional 10,000 suicides were connected to the Great Recession. You had 2.3 million people kicked out, made foreclosed from their homes in 2008. And like the damage we see to our economies to these days, to our high streets, to our wages. People realized in this moment that, okay, this isn't just a story about bad apples anymore. The whole...
Not to alarm everybody, but if the AI bubble pop, 2008 is gonna look like we would wish it was back to 2008 if the AI bubble pops. And the same people who were betting against the American housing market, I don't know if you ever watched The Big Shot, they betting against AI again. So something to definitely pay attention to.
Whole fucking tree is rotten. And so various political movements came along to try and deal with this, to try and talk about it more from a systemic level. Occupy Wall Street comes in, pointing at corporate power deregulation and blaming them for causing the crisis. But ultimately, Occupy Wall Street never took power. It never broke up the banks. It didn't succeed. It is in this moment which creates the grounds for a very different type of politician. Right, so very luckily, the media had spent a good 30 years telling everyone that Donald Trump was this like genius, slick businessman. They gave him a TV show showing how ruthless, like great business boy he was. So it was great they did that because it meant that he had an opportunity to run as president. In 2016, he's on stage in a debate with Hillary Clinton, and she thinks she's got an absolute heater in her pocket to fire at Donald Trump.
He doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So
that makes me smart.
His response to this question isn't to go, no, I didn't do that. It's an accident. It was a mistake. He doesn't deny having not paid his tax because of...
This is so reminiscent of somebody I know who I've been trying to tell them, yo, this is a conflict of interest. I'm not saying you did anything illegal. I'm saying it's a conflict of interest, and all you get is dismissed. I'm smart.
Loopholes. He instead says that him having done that makes him smart.
Did you use that $916 million loss to avoid paying personal federal income taxes?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And so do all of her donors, or most of her donors. I know many of her donors. Her donors took massive tax write-offs.
So have
a
you
lot
not
of
paid
my
personal federal income taxes?
A lot of my write-off was depreciation and other things that Hillary, as a senator, allowed. And she'll always allow it because the people that give her all this money, they want it. That's why. See, I understand the tax code better than anybody that's ever run for president.
But just let's we have to take a moment with that response and look at it, because in any other timeline, that would be game over, right? Your political career, when you go, yes, I committed tax evasion, that's you done, brother. But in a post-2008, a post-Occupy Wall Street, and post-truth world, whereby society has just been shown that the system is corrupt, and that your attempts to try and change that through Bernie Sanders, that's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, it is what it is. It's gonna be like this. Deal with it. In that context, a response like what Donald Trump gave suddenly becomes a credential. Because, if millions of people have seen and believe that the system is a scam, then if someone of that class, that elite class, admits it's a scam, in sort of a very strange way, they become honest. And so by doing this, Trump is able, he gets a magical power in this moment whereby he can use any of the many financial crimes he was being investigated for and found guilty of having done, from the Trump University scam and the Trump charity scam. He could repackage financial fraud into being evidence that actually he's a very smart, cunning businessman. Or it's a completely unfounded political witch hunt by the deep state, depending on the mood of the day.
Just so you understand, it's the single greatest witch hunt in American history, probably in history, but in American history, it's a disgraceful thing.
Trump gets into office, right? And a big part of his story, his campaign, is pledging to drain the swamp.
It's time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
And he actually sort of does it, right? He gets into power and he comes out with this ethics order which bans some executive branch officials from working with a lobbying firm for 5 years after they leave government to avoid conflict of interest, and de facto working for them when they're in office to be rewarded.
I just want to say at this point, this is not a uniquely Nevis thing. I could remember our Prime Minister, the great Dr. Joe, speaking about corruption years now, and speaking about the need to clean up the system. Say how we're going to get Len Harris. Say how Timothy been a walk out of development bank with millions of dollars. And now you see we're getting ready for 5 years. We don't hear this conversation anymore. There was supposedly a case between Social Security and Len Harris. You don't hear the Prime Minister come and give us an update. You don't hear any money was recovered. And so I do not see any serious attempt made by those in power to actually address any type of corruption. There's always corruption when you're out of office, which is one of the reasons why persons who are seeking to replace the people in power must have concrete plans and timelines for how you are gonna catch some of the corrupt officials and how you're gonna change the culture and the system in general. It's not enough to just say there is this corruption, that corruption. How are we gonna fix this situation?
With a job the moment they leave.
So this is a 5-year lobbying ban. And this is all of the people, most of the people standing behind me will not be able to go to work or do anything adverse to our wonderful country.
So he does this, right? And from his base and like headlines, he gets to enjoy the applause for having drained the swamp, going after corruption, going after the elites. All while he was literally filling up his administration with lobbyists and industry insiders. But like, you know, don't worry about these ones. I've like checked them out. These bros are chill, they can hang. In the final hours of Donald Trump's presidency, at 12:50 a.m. in the morning, he announces a huge wave of presidential pardons. Lil Wayne, Kodak Black. Twitter and media in general, it goes crazy. They lose their mind. They're like, oh my God, Donald Trump knows who Kodak Black is. Fuck all that other shit, I'm about my script. But quietly, in the background, you know, whilst everyone's talking about Kodak Black and Lil Wayne, Donald Trump also pardons Steve Bannon, charged over allegedly defrauding Trump supporters through a border wall fundraiser, as well as Elliot Broidy, a top Trump fundraiser who pled guilty to illegal foreign lobbying. Then, right, as all this spectacle is happening, the headlines obsessed with these rappers, minutes before Donald Trump leaves office, Donald Trump revokes his own lobbying ban. And it's in this moment where Donald Trump perfectly sets himself up for his second term.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
So the first term, right, Donald Trump's first term, it was a test run for this new style of politics. An era defined by Donald Trump's erratic decision-making, where he would wield his incredible power as the president to bend markets, to reward people he liked and crush people he didn't like. So when Trump comes back, you know, for the sequel, round 2, this time, he like just surrounds himself with just MAGA sycophants and loyalists, like the ride till I die bros. And it's in this moment, in the first days and weeks of Donald Trump entering his second presidency, where we see how his unrestrained power and the culture of white-collar crime, fraud and corruption that had become normalized and accepted as just a part of the DNA of Western capitalism. You know, before this moment, right, the last 20, 30 years, there was always this kind of mirage, like the government is meant to be separate, fraud and like dodgy dealings, they were always kept very hidden and quiet. But now this had become overt and infused directly with the MAGA brand of politics. Straight out the gate, Donald Trump monetizes being the president. Around the inauguration, they launch a shitcoin for both Trump and Melania.
Trump's companies have been selling several different kinds of crypto coins, where it's the Trump coin or the president of Argentina's meme coin. They are rife with self-dealing and insider trading. Trump has made at least $350 million from this meme coin so far. He plans to sell as many as 800 million more of these coins after he's increased their price by announcing these dinners for its top buyers.
The classic setup where a few wallets hold most of the coins. They make the big announcement, and obviously it's going to get fucking headlines. Like, people know that Trump is dodgy, but no one could believe that he would do a shitcoin rug pull as he steps into office. That almost even felt too far to believe.
Well, I don't know if it benefited. I don't know where it is. I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful. I haven't checked it. Where is it today?
You made a lot of money, sir.
How much?
Several $billion, it seems like, in the last several days.
Several billion? That's peanuts for these guys.
After he does this, Donald Trump tries to see now how can he monetize the corporations and the billionaires themselves. He sets up a thing called World Liberty Finance. It's another Trump-linked crypto venture. And this is where you start seeing individual billionaires from different countries use it as an opportunity to funnel money directly to Trump. Justin Sun, the Tron crypto billionaire, buys 45 million tokens and he gets named as an advisor. The Abu Dhabi-backed investment firm called MGX. They used $2 billion of another Trump shitcoin for an investment that they made into Binance. Crypto aside, Qatar then goes and buys Donald Trump a luxury Boeing 747-8 worth around, 400 million, gives it to Trump, and then just a coincidence, Donald Trump sets up a Trump-branded golf course in Qatar.
This week it was revealed that even as he holds the White House, Donald Trump apparently secured a deal to build a massive golf course as part of a $5.5 billion development in Qatar.
So what we see very quickly emerge in the very early days of the second term is actually a new type of economic model. This isn't just like an individual thing. This is now a new system, a new economic structure of how to win in the American market, which can only be described as a pay-to-access model. Pay Donald Trump something, get in his good books, and in return, you get to receive preferential treatment. Very quickly, the wealthy elites realize that this is the new game. You see it when Trump is sworn in. He is surrounded by the wealthiest men on earth. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, Tim Cook, Sam Altman. And what they are doing makes sense, right? Because after having seen Trump in his first term personally go after companies, organizations and politicians who he felt wronged him, by these lot being at the inauguration, they were signaling that, hey, look, Mr. Trump, we get it. We're not gonna rock the boat, right? We're in the get-along gang. But come on, it's me, Zucky. I've always been super based and red-pilled. I fucking love masculine energy.
Something, the kind of masculine energy, I think, is good. And obviously, society has plenty of that, but I think corporate culture was really like trying to get away from it.
His 2025 inaugural committee raised $239 million, driven by these major corporations, these wealthy billionaires, and AI and crypto companies. And the logic makes...
Even, listen, one of the things that I do appreciate about America, and the UK for that matter, is that at least there is some kind of way that you could check to see how much the different parties have made. I would love if the Navy's Reformation Party had to disclose the finances. I would love if this happened to the Concerned Citizens Movement and any other party. How do we know that these parties and these politicians are not bought and paid for if we can't see some kind of receipts at some stage in time? Does not make any sense to me.
Complete sense. Because if a business's sole goal is growth, profit, and to pay shareholders, and the economy that they're operating has now structurally changed, whereby in order for your company to grow, you need to buy the president a ballroom, then you're going to do it. And if anything, it's kind of easier. If beforehand you had to compete on pricing and good products and buying people out, now you just have to fucking buy Trump some cool sunglasses. And like the specifics of what he can do as a president is obvious. We've seen it, right? It's tariffs. He can arbitrarily just cast tariffs, and if you're in the good books, you can get an exemption.
Tim was talking to me about tariffs, and it's tough for Apple to pay tariffs if they're competing, and I thought he made a very compelling argument, so I'm thinking about it.
He can also drop investigations that are being done by, fraud and health and safety committees into your businesses. He can gut regulators. He can fast track your data centers being built. He can shape the regulation around AI. He can even try and fight foreign governments who are also investigating you. He can do that, or he can do the exact opposite. He can punish the enemies and reward the loyalists. The ballroom is really the perfect example where the biggest companies, all of the companies that have vested interests in government policy, all of them donated towards getting a ballroom built because Trump wanted it.
Trump says the project is being funded entirely by private donors. The White House reportedly securing millions from Lockheed Martin and Google. Microsoft, Apple, and Meta also reportedly listed as potential donors.
Amazon is on the list. Obviously, Amazon's forked out a reported $40 million to air a Melania Trump documentary. Apple is also on the list. CEO Tim Cook there, remember, memorably presented Trump with that 24-karat gold and glass statue. And then there are a lot of crypto connections on the donor list.
Well, kind of. I mean, I just read that the taxpayers now might have to pay for it at the cost of $1 billion. Who's counting? And the whole scheme is genius. Not only do they shape industry, but they can even shape the media environment. Bezos, Elon, Larry Ellison, buying up Twitter, buying up TikTok, Washington Post, and being able to change these platforms to become more endearing towards Trump. Even if these platforms lose their money, it is rewarded by the privileges Trump can give you in your other companies.
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f yourself. But go f yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is.
So what I'm trying to get at, and what I think is clear, is that Western American capitalism has fundamentally changed. It no longer exists in the same way it used to. There was always small elements of this, but now this is the fundamental structure of the American economy, and that is that they are now a pay-to-access economy. This has other names: an oligarchy, a kleptocracy, and it leaves you in a problem, right? Because once that is the structure, once politics becomes about a market of inside access, the next step from there is obvious. You can now commodify that access, profit from it, speculate on it. You can now profit directly from the very decisions that that government that you're inside of makes. All right, so with this level of corruption and just outright quid pro quo, what happens to the economy is that it becomes more and more detached from reality. As we float away into like this postmodern economy, it becomes inevitable that a platform like Polymarket would come along. This is a platform that allows you to gamble Bitcoin on literally anything. Now, how many tweets Elon Musk will do in a day, how long a speech might be by the press secretary, or what time will Trump bomb Iran?
Now, the BBC has found a pattern of spikes in trades and financial markets ahead of public announcements by US President Donald Trump, including during the Iran war. It's raised suspicions of insider trading, whereby bets are made by people based on information that is not available to the general public.
And like, let's pretend that, you know, you're in this cool group of dope dudes, and maybe you know the answer to some of those questions. You can go on Polymarket and, you know, place a couple of bets.
But then suddenly, on the Monday morning, before the stock market opened in the US, he said that the United States had had very good and productive conversations with Tehran over a complete and total resolution to hostilities. That's what he posted on Truth Social. So then oil drops by 14%, which is understandable. You go back, though, and look at the trading volume data, and you see a massive spike in the number of oil futures contracts exchanged between about 14 to 16 minutes before the post. That's hundreds of millions of dollars, and those traders will have made a huge amount of money through what's known as short selling. That's just one example of quite a few that I found, Sally.
According to Guardian, 16 bets that made 100 grand each were done so by accurately predicting the exact time of a US airstrike on Iran, and a later $950 million bet just before Trump announced a ceasefire with Iran. This is where the result of those economic reforms in the 80s, deregulating the finance industry, gets us in a place where the modern economy becomes this digitized, financialized mess and completely disconnects from the real world. What I mean by that is, if you can make incredibly high returns from these specific industries that are closely tied to the Trump administration, who is directly offering them privilege, things like crypto, gambling, AI speculation, and resource sapping data centers, what we have to remember is that the way what economics is meant to do, what capitalism is meant to do, is take real world resources, energy, money, food, water, etc., and it is supposed to direct them where they're needed. But we can...
I know that some of this is complicated. I know that Polymarket or Kalshi does not particularly exist in the islands. However, it is important to know that that does not preclude or exclude the leaders and persons in these jurisdictions from having like a touch of corruption on them. suddenly appearing on maybe a yacht in the Mediterranean. Some of these little things, it 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 sh- it just, there's little leaks of it, and you could also see it outright in certain other circumstances. It's just fishy.
See that the incentives are becoming so detached where you can make incredibly high returns by building very abstract things that provide people very little value, and particularly in AI's case, removes people's jobs. Whilst in the real world, like, the world that real people live in, there are lots of things we need that we don't have. Housing, hospitals, schools, improved infrastructure, trains, jobs. And this is where we have entered a period of time in history where we have sort of fundamentally forgotten why corruption is a bad thing. Because fundamentally, I'm not a capitalist, but the idea is that there should be competition amongst businesses to make the best product that people need and direct resources in places that are needed. But you completely lose that competition when the entire economy turns into which companies does the man who is nearly in his 80s like the most, and he gets to win. And ironically, even for these very profitable companies now, ultimately, it will make them less competitive on the global stage. If the market isn't there to punish them when they're investing into things that are pointless, when eventually things correct and other countries go off in different directions, America has driven all of these resources into inefficient businesses. Businesses that are built more on bravado, marketing, and delusion.
See, this is one of the things that we can understand easily. If we only building up with friends, if there is no merit to who is to which businesses are getting the deals, if you're just promoting your friend, ultimately there's not gonna be true competition. We ain't giving it to who got equality. We just give a friend. And so it is true, as Jimmy said, we kind of lost sight of why corruption is bad. But you better believe corruption is bad. And if you don't believe that in the history of these islands that there's been no corruption, then whatever you're smoking need to be distributed to the rest of the population. Let everybody be as happy and as optimistic as you, who believe that the mission is not possible. What we need is something that could catch these people who are violating the law. We need, as my partner was telling me this afternoon, we need more robust laws and enforcement in order to make this thing really happen.
As opposed to real value. America is becoming what is often called a K-shaped economy, where we're seeing this strange thing where the economy is kind of staying afloat, the markets are at all-time highs because the wealthy people are doing so well that their standard of living is massively improving. But the poor people, their standard of living is collapsing, where people are fighting to survive and just surviving on debt. And this style of politics isn't limited to Trump. Trump and his decisions affect the global economy. And one of their biggest exports now is this style of politics.
Right-wing, conservative, an admirer of Trump, and often labeled as pro-Russia, Orban sharply criticized the European Union in his speech.
The MAGA-esque movements are happening all around Europe. You saw it in Hungary with Orban, hence why they got rid of him. Currently, you're seeing it in Argentina with Milei, and you're seeing it in the UK with Farage. All of these movements are fundamentally built around the same ideas as MAGA politics, and they're also all caught up in their own scandals, taking shady donations, and are attacking institutions and moving us closer.
I was listening to something on how reform you could get the money, and I want to listen to one episode, and he's right. Shady as hell. Slim shady.
Closer to this kind of political capitalism. A politics of having the state create private fortunes for the people that bend the knee and become close to power, whilst punishing everyone else. But within this, there is a structural problem for their own politics. Ultimately, this style of politics it just can't fix anything. It just can't improve your lives. Like, it can't make houses or bring about better jobs. And because they can never genuinely improve things and actually leave their country in a good place with new foundations to build a better future for ordinary people, in order for them to remain in power, what these politicians have to offer the people is a continuous, endless theater. From dramatic raids, firings, kidnapping other presidents, collapsing markets with sudden tariffs, recovering markets with a tweet, endless threats, wars, deportations, and humiliation of their enemies. When politics can no longer provide for people materially, it turns into a performance, a political theater. If you can't fix and improve people's lives, well, at least we can give them a little morale boost. Crush someone, embarrass someone, humiliate someone, make someone else suffer in the same way that the people are. Punish the baddies.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
There are many examples of this kind of political theater, but I do think the most important is Doge. It was like the perfection of this idea of the spectacle, whereby Elon goes out with the chainsaw, shouting about, you know, we're going to cut $2 trillion, and they're screaming about waste, fraud, and abuse. And the moment they come in, they got an entire department specifically focused on returning money to American citizens who have been victims of fraud, called the CFPB. This is an agency that has made $20 billion. It doesn't lose money. And they chose to cut an anti-fraud agency in their bid to get rid of fraud.
This is a fight between millions of hardworking people who just don't want to get cheated and a handful of billionaires like Elon Musk who want the chance to cheat them.
And he makes the big website. He says, look, we're saving so much money. Meanwhile, he's literally in the government with a team of children gutting and firing and making cuts to departments that are investigating Elon Musk's businesses for wrongdoing.
But a new investigation by the New York Times reports Musk has been targeting many of the federal agencies and officials who've been engaged in investigations of Musk's own multiple companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the social media platform X. The Times reports, quote, at least 11 federal agencies that have been affected by those moves have more than 32 continuing investigations, pending complaints, or enforcement actions into Mr. Musk's 6 companies, unquote.
And after all of this, right after it, although he claimed he was going to cut $2 trillion, the actual amount they cut, which, you know, people have had to estimate because they're not very transparent about what the fuck they were doing, the estimate is $1.4 billion of savings were made. And this is not like savings. These were largely just cuts to things. So services removed. They were going after things like Meals on Wheels, which is food for old, vulnerable people. The whole thing was political theatre. The front being that they were cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. But in reality, Elon was just gutting the government's ability to stop waste, fraud, and abuse. And naturally, you know, after hearing all this, you might have a question. You might say, why is no one going to jail? Because everything I'm saying is...
I've been asking this question for years. How is it possible that in my entire life, all I hear from every different set of politicians who hold the power, but not even just that, I don't hear some of them were in power too, that there was thieving going on. How is it possible nobody got jail? What the white collar unit to do? Because right now at this moment in time, it really make no sense in this and he's gonna white collar unit. How many people do they arrest a year? What the record look like? They making money? Are they making money for themselves? I don't get it.
It's verifiable. You can look it up. All of this happened, but no one's in prison. And part of it is that this whole corruption is actually like self-protecting. The scandals themselves become part of the show, whereby Donald Trump, you know, with his very clever marketing strategy for MAGA, can claim that any investigation or attempt to investigate him is actually just a political witch hunt by the deep state and his enemies. Every quid pro quo, you know, getting the jet, he can just frame that as, look, I'm Trump, I'm a smart negotiator, slick businessman. This is the end game for white-collar crime, is where the corrupt businessman no longer longer even have to hide the fact they're corrupt. Instead, Trump can campaign on it. He can aestheticize it. He can rebrand it as being anti the establishment. His movement can reabsorb it back into itself and bamboozle everyone. And this is why no one's in jail, is because really the American system, it wasn't really built for this. I mean, there was some, back in the early days and throughout history, there have been shady bros, big, rich, evil bastards doing fucked up shit in America. But I think even them, they didn't expect that it would get to this point where you could just be so outlandishly corrupt. They thought you had to at least, try and hide it. There's been scandals in the past, but usually it would lead to like a president resigning. But why you don't see that with Trump is because, well, to get a resignation, it's built on there needing to be a feeling of shame. Donald Trump is shame.
Shame? Anyway, don't even want to call my goat's name, but you gotta have some kind of shame in order for resignation to work, in order for politicians to feel like, bah, you know, I probably need to stop this behavior.
Shameless, and the people around him are sycophants. For him to have to resign, the people in his party have to want to get him out, and they don't, because this is the whole economy now. Get close to Trump, make money, you're good. So you're not going to see the Republicans kick out their own homie. It's very unlikely that Trump will go to jail, at least whilst he's in office, due to a mix of DOJ policy, the president's control over the executive branch, the Supreme Court's immunity doctrine.
The US Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump has some immunity from prosecution for official actions taken while he was in the White House. The landmark decision is likely to delay his trial for interfering in the 2020 election. The former president described the decision as a big win.
So yeah, it is quite unlikely that any of these bastards will go to prison in the meantime, unless things get so bad that Trump needs to throw a few bros in, just to sacrifice a couple to keep people happy. Like, maybe we'll just give him JD Vance. No one really likes him anyway. But what I want to do, and I think is important for our analysis, instead of speculating on will he go to prison, will people around him go to prison, that even that perspective strikes at the very core of the argument I'm making in this video. What we were talking about at the beginning is that this isn't about one guy or even one group of bad guys. If we look at Trump and the people around him as just the bad apples that, if we could just put them in jail, everything will be okay, then we are missing the entire point. These people and whatever the fuck they are doing right now is the logical conclusion of the system that we have built, that we live in. A system that has been long built on deregulation, getting rid of the rules, the financialization of everything, scams, corruption, the endless growth model, profit over people. Trump and his cronies, they are just the fruit of a very rotten tree. If we let this become the same story as every other white-collar crime story in the past, where the man becomes the story, but the system stays innocent, then we will keep getting this same outcome eventually anyway. I would say the silver lining of Trumpism and the global ascension of the far right in general is it's almost like, it's like ripping off the band-aid. They're exposing the real system that has been there the whole time, and we get to see it for what it really is. And maybe if enough people come to realize this and come to see this system for what it really is, maybe we'll stop asking whether one man goes to jail and we start asking, how do we fundamentally rebuild our systems and our society where power belongs to people and not in the hands of major corporations and billionaires? If you enjoy this,
good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight once again. I'll start off by giving thanks, and I'm gonna end by giving thanks. You could rejoin us in 10 minutes for Pakis and Ladana. Gonna be releasing some Culture Armor music, so if you wanna get in some Culture Armor vibes on the 1st of June, then tune back in about 10 minutes, going live again with Ladana and Pakis. Thanks everybody for following. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for interacting with the show. Hope everybody is good. And I will see you guys next week. Let me close this thing here out quick. What's this? Indeed. Indeed. Bless up.
Video, be sure to support me on Patreon. It massively helps me and the team. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you next one. Peace.
Stock market rise and fall. How it really affect the small and all when the leaders make decisions. Alan, watch close with precision. Deep analysis every week, giving voices to the ones who seek. Audience calling from abroad. Never think it's London Yard, Florida, Jamaica too. Everybody locked in for the global view. Reason with the people now. Search for the answers somehow. Every Monday we unite. Knowledge shining through the night. Friend, keep the fire blaze. Conversation elevate. Alan lead.